She stood frozen at the luxury gala as her billionaire husband told 500 elite guests that his wife was too simple to understand his world. But what happened next changed everything. The St. Francis Yacht Club overlooked San Francisco Bay that November evening, its windows reflecting chandelier light onto dark water. Silicon Valley's most powerful figures had gathered for the Westfield Foundation Gala, a $40,000 per plate event where tech titans wrote checks between courses of molecular gastronomy. Vivian Caldwell sat at table 3, her champagne untouched, watching her husband Bradford accept an award for his $5 million donation. Then he said the words that would destroy their marriage and birth her empire. My wife comes from a simpler background. She doesn't really grasp the complexities of what we do in enterprise software. Sometimes I feel like I'm living two separate lives, the high-stakes world of business, and then coming home to someone who thinks running errands is equivalent to managing a $100 million company. The laughter that followed wasn't universal, but it was enough. Enough to make every face turn toward Vivian. Enough to transform her from invisible to specimen. Enough to finally wake her up. What Bradford didn't know, sitting there basking in applause, was that his simple wife had designed the user interface that saved his company. That she'd spent countless nights refining the very presentations that won him those millions. That the dismissal he'd just delivered to amuse his peers would cost him clients, reputation, and ultimately, his position at the top. Because Vivian didn't just leave that gala, she didn't just file for divorce. She walked out with $42 million, the knowledge to build something better, and the motivation to systematically dismantle everything her ex-husband thought he owned. This is the story of how one woman transformed public humiliation into a business empire worth $800 million. How she took the company her ex-husband built on her invisible labor and made it obsolete. How the very background he mocked became her competitive advantage. The revenge was methodical, legal, and absolutely devastating. Stanford University, 2014. Vivian Harper sat in the computer science lab at 3 in the morning, debugging code for her capstone project. Bradford Caldwell walked in looking for a forgotten laptop charger. He found something else entirely. You're building a neural network for image recognition? He'd leaned over her shoulder, expensive cologne mixing with the lab's stale coffee smell. Most grad students can't even conceptualize this level of architecture. Vivian had looked up at this confident stranger in his $1,000 sneakers and Patek Philippe watch. It's not that complicated once you understand the mathematics behind convolutional layers. Bradford laughed, not mockingly, but genuinely delighted. You just explained in one sentence what my professor took 3 lectures to muddle through. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. Bradford came from Caldwell Industries, a family empire spanning real estate and venture capital. His father owned 14 hotels. His mother sat on boards of companies whose products filled every American home. Weekend meant sailing in Monterey or flying to Aspen. Vivian's father managed a hardware store in Fresno. Her mother taught 5th grade. College meant student loans and 20-hour work weeks at the campus bookstore. Weekends meant studying in the library because her apartment had 3 roommates. Yet somehow they worked. Bradford saw brilliance where others saw quiet dedication. Vivian saw ambition tempered by genuine curiosity where others saw privilege. 9 months later, he proposed with a ring worth more than her parents' house. The Napa Valley wedding should have been a warning. 400 guests, none of whom Vivian knew beyond her own family's single table. Bradford's mother, Eleanor, had pulled her aside during reception planning. "Dear, we've arranged for a speech coach. Nothing dramatic, just to help you feel more comfortable in Bradford's circles." Vivian had smiled, swallowed the insult, and delivered a toast that made venture capitalists reach for their checkbooks. She didn't need coaching. She needed respect. Those early years, though, they held genuine magic. Bradford would burst through their Palo Alto apartment door with wild startup ideas. Vivian would listen, sketch interfaces on their kitchen table, transform his enthusiasm into executable plans. When Velocity Systems nearly collapsed 6 months after launch, she spent 72 straight hours redesigning their entire user experience. "You saved us," Bradford had whispered, holding her as sunrise broke through their kitchen window. "The investors loved the new design. We just secured Series A funding. 12 million. He never mentioned her name in the investor meetings. Not once. The pattern established itself quietly. Bradford pitched, Vivienne perfected. He presented, she produced. His name on patents, her solutions powering them. She told herself partnership meant supporting each other's strengths. That recognition didn't matter when you were building something together. Velocity Systems grew from 5 employees to 500. Their kitchen table gave way to a glass office building in Menlo Park. Bradford's suits became more expensive, his circles more exclusive. Vivian's contributions became more invisible, dissolved into phrases like, my team, and we discovered. But here's where the fairy tale started cracking. Not with dramatic confrontation or obvious betrayal, but with 1,000 tiny erasures. The company holiday party where Bradford introduced her as my wife instead of our UX director. The board meeting where her 3-month project became something Bradford threw together over a weekend. The interview where he called her his secret weapon while explaining she preferred to stay behind the scenes. She hadn't preferred anything. She'd been systematically edited out of her own success story. 7 years of marriage taught Vivian the difference between being alone and being lonely. The Atherton mansion Bradford bought after Velocity Systems went public sprawled across 3 acres, 12,000 square feet of marble and glass where her footsteps echoed like questions nobody answered. The corrections started small. During a dinner party with potential investors from Shanghai, Vivian mentioned her optimization of their cloud infrastructure. Bradford's hand found her knee under the table, a gentle squeeze that felt like a vice. What my wife means is she helped organize the documentation while our CTO restructured everything. His smile never wavered. She's wonderful at keeping things tidy. The investors nodded politely. Vivian's throat closed around her correction. She'd written 40,000 lines of code for that infrastructure. Tidying had nothing to do with it. These moments accumulated like compound interest on misery. The Forbes interview where Bradford called her his muse, not his collaborator, not his partner, just inspiration he could acknowledge without sharing credit. The company retreats where spouses received gift bags and spa vouchers while founders discussed strategy. The board dinners where her place card read, Mrs. Caldwell, even though she'd kept her last name. You're being sensitive, Bradford would say later, loosening his tie in their bedroom that cost more than most people's homes. I'm protecting you from the stress. You wouldn't want to deal with hostile takeover attempts and SEC filings. Except she'd written the defensive provisions that prevented those takeovers. She'd identified the loopholes that kept them compliant. Her sensitivity had saved them $14 million in potential fines. By year 5, the isolation felt deliberate. Bradford scheduled critical meetings during her mother's visit. He forgot to mention company parties until she'd already made other plans. When she did attend events, he'd introduce her to the same people repeatedly, as if she couldn't possibly remember faces from one gathering to the next. The Atherton house became her beautiful prison. 6 bedrooms she didn't choose. A kitchen designed for caterers, not cooking. An office Bradford converted to a gift wrapping room because you don't really need workspace at home, do you? She started her own projects in the pool house, running extension cords from the main building, because Bradford questioned why she needed her own internet connection. We have Wi-Fi in the main house. Unless you're hiding something? The breaking points came in waves. The Innovation Summit where Bradford presented her algorithm as his breakthrough, while she sat in the audience wearing the designer dress he'd chosen because her own taste was too academic. The anniversary dinner where he gave her a tennis bracelet, she didn't play tennis, and told their friends how lucky he was to have someone who didn't complicate his life with career drama. Friends. His friends. Hers had gradually disappeared, dismissed as not quite the right fit for their new life. Her Stanford study group became those people who probably want jobs. Her coding bootcamp teaching became that little volunteer thing. 3 months before the gala, Vivian discovered Bradford had been presenting her interface designs to the board under his name. Not team efforts, not collaborative works, his sole creative vision. When confronted, he didn't even deny it. Sweetheart, everything we have is because of my family's connections and my ability to sell. Your doodles wouldn't mean anything without my platform. Besides, what's mine is yours, right? Why does credit matter when we share bank accounts? They didn't share bank accounts. Bradford managed the finances because numbers at that scale would just stress her out. She designed systems processing billions in transactions. The only thing stressing her out was the systematic erasure of her existence beyond Bradford Caldwell's wife, the housewife who married up. The loneliest part? Nobody else saw it happening. To Silicon Valley, they were the power couple. To her family, she'd achieved the American dream. To herself, she was disappearing one dismissed achievement at a time. Vivian had actually felt hopeful that November evening. She'd selected her own dress for once, an elegant midnight blue gown she'd bought herself, not one of Bradford's approved choices. Her wedding rings caught the light as she applied lipstick in their bedroom mirror, practicing the smile she'd perfected for these events. Tonight would be different. Tonight, Bradford was receiving the Westfield Foundation's Innovation Award. Maybe recognition would soften him. Maybe success would make him generous. The St. Francis Yacht Club commanded the San Francisco waterfront like a monument to old money. Established in 1927, its members had weathered market crashes and tech booms from behind those same mahogany walls. Valet attendants knew every guest's name, which year they'd joined, whose grandfather had sponsored whom. Vivian handed over the keys to Bradford's Tesla, noting how the attendant's expression shifted when he realized she was driving alone. Bradford had gone ahead for rehearsal, or so he'd said. She found him later holding court at the bar, surrounded by CEOs whose companies her code quietly powered. "There's my beautiful wife," he announced too loudly, whiskey already warming his voice. His arm circled her waist possessively. "Gentlemen, you know Vivian." They didn't, of course. They knew Mrs. Caldwell, the pleasant woman who smiled at appropriate moments and never interrupted business talk. Dinner began at 8 sharp, 5 courses paired with wines worth more than minimum wage workers earned in a month. Vivian sat between Bradford and a pharmaceutical executive who spent 40 minutes explaining his yacht specifications. She nodded, smiled, let her mind wander to the application she'd been developing in secret, something that would revolutionize user authentication if she ever got brave enough to launch it. Then came Bradford's moment. He ascended the podium with practiced ease, adjusting the microphone with movements she recognized from his mirror rehearsals. The room quieted. 500 faces turned expectant. "Innovation," he began, "isn't just about writing code or designing systems. It's about vision, leadership, the ability to transform complex ideas into profitable realities." Standard opening. Vivian had heard variations for years. She lifted her champagne glass, ready to toast his success despite everything. "Many of you wonder how I've managed to build velocity systems into what it is today. The truth is, it takes a certain kind of person. Someone who can navigate both technical complexities and social dynamics. Someone who understands that business isn't just algorithms. It's relationships, strategy, intuition." His pause felt theatrical. Vivian noticed several people glancing her way, perhaps expecting acknowledgement of the partnership everyone assumed existed. "My wife comes from a simpler background." The words landed like ice water. Vivian's fingers tightened on her napkin. "She doesn't really grasp the complexities of what we do. When I come home talking about Series D funding or acquisition strategies, I can see her eyes glaze over. She tries, bless her heart, but some people are meant for simpler things. Running errands, planning dinner parties, the domestic sphere." Laughter bubbled up from several tables. Not everyone. She noticed a few uncomfortable shifts, but enough. Enough to make her face burn. Enough to make the pharmaceutical executive beside her pat her hand with nauseating sympathy. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living 2 separate lives," Bradford continued, warming to his theme. "The high-stakes world where we're changing the future, and then this quieter space where my biggest concern is whether we've remembered to buy organic groceries." More laughter. Bradford's mother, Eleanor, actually applauded. "But that's sacrifice, isn't it? We can't all be warriors. Some of us need to be the home that warriors return to." The standing ovation felt endless. Vivian sat frozen while bodies rose around her, applauding her husband's casual demolition of her worth. When Bradford returned to their table, he kissed her cheek as if he'd just delivered a love letter instead of a public execution. "You don't mind, do you, sweetheart?" Just having some fun with the crowd. She stood with mechanical precision, placed her napkin on her untouched dessert plate, met his eyes once, long enough to watch confusion replace satisfaction. Then she walked, through the maze of tables where conversations died as she passed. Past Eleanor's hissed, "Where are you going?" Through the lobby where her heels announced her departure on marble floors. Into the November night where ocean wind cut through her dress. In the parking lot, she sat in Bradford's Tesla and screamed until her throat burned. Then she made a choice. Not to go home, not to pretend, not to shrink. She chose herself. Vivian didn't go home that night. She drove to a Marriott near the airport, paid cash, and sat in a beige room listening to planes depart for places where nobody knew her as Bradford Caldwell's simple wife. At dawn, she returned to Atherton. Bradford was eating breakfast in the kitchen, scrolling through congratulatory texts from the previous evening. He didn't look up when she entered. "There you are, bit dramatic leaving like that. The Johnsons were asking where you went." He buttered his toast with methodical strokes. "I told them you weren't feeling well. Probably overwhelmed by all those big conversations." Vivian set her clutch on the marble counter. The sound made him glance up briefly before returning to his phone. "I want a divorce." His thumb paused mid-scroll. Then he laughed, actually laughed, spreading organic jam with casual indifference. "You're upset about the speech. I get it. Maybe I went a bit far with the jokes." He took a bite, chewed slowly. "Tell you what, I'll buy you something nice. That new boutique in Palo Alto you mentioned? Get whatever you want." "I want a divorce, Bradford." This time he set down his phone, studied her like she was malfunctioning software requiring diagnosis. "Because of one speech? Don't be ridiculous. You have everything here. This house, the cars, the status. What would you even do without me? Go back to Fresno? Teach coding to high schoolers?" His tone shifted from dismissive to patronizing. "Sweetheart, you haven't worked in 7 years. You don't have connections, references, recent experience. The tech world has evolved while you've been planning dinner parties." "I haven't been planning dinner parties. I've been maintaining your entire technical infrastructure from the pool house." He shrugged. "Nobody knows that. And who would believe you? The housewife who claims she built velocity systems?" Another laugh, sharper now. "You'll get over this mood. You always do." Vivian picked up her clutch. "My lawyer will be in touch." "What lawyer? You don't even have your own bank account. The one I hired 6 months ago when I finally admitted you'd never see me as anything more than decoration." His face shifted through several expressions. Disbelief, anger, then back to that insufferable confidence. "Fine. Waste money on lawyers. You'll get standard spousal support. Maybe keep the Mercedes. I'll have you sign an NDA about company operations naturally. You'll be comfortable enough. Lonely, but comfortable." "I documented everything." "Bradford." "What?" "Every line of code I wrote, every design I created, every problem I solved while you took credit. 7 years of receipts. Get commits from my personal laptop. Emails you sent thanking me for saving the company. Before you learned to be more careful with written evidence." She moved toward the door. "My lawyer specializes in intellectual property disputes within marriages. Apparently it's more common than you'd think. Brilliant women married to mediocre men who steal their work." His face drained of color. "You wouldn't. The company would survive without my code running your core systems, without my algorithms managing your data flows, without me fixing what you break every time you try to improve something?" She turned at the doorway. "You're right about one thing. I haven't worked in 7 years. I've been building your empire for free. That ends now." The drive to Sacramento took 2 hours. Her parents' house sat on the same tree-lined street where she'd learned to ride a bike, small and warm compared to the Atherton mansion. Her mother opened the door before she could knock, arms already open. "We saw the videos," her mother whispered into her hair. "Someone posted his speech online." Her father stood behind, holding a baseball bat he'd grabbed when the car pulled up. He set it down, jaw tight. "You stay as long as you need. If this is striking a chord, subscribe for more stories of triumph over dismissal." Rachel Martinez specialized in Silicon Valley divorces, where intellectual property meant more than real estate. Her Los Angeles office had recovered hundreds of millions for spouses whose contributions vanished into their partner's success stories. When Vivian walked in with 3 external hard drives and 14 notebooks of handwritten algorithms, Rachel actually smiled. This is the most comprehensive documentation I've seen in 20 years of practice. California's community property laws meant assets acquired during marriage split equally. But Vivian wanted more than money. She wanted acknowledgement, recognition, the right to her own creations. Every function, every optimization, every bug fix, I logged them all, Vivian explained, spreading papers across Rachel's conference table. Here's the authentication system that prevented the data breach in 2019. Bradford told investors he'd developed it over a weekend. It took me 4 months. Rachel traced her finger along the timeline. These Git commits prove you wrote the code. The metadata shows dates, times, even GPS locations. Mostly from your pool house, I see. He converted my office into gift storage, said I didn't need workspace. The legal filing hit Bradford's desk on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, his counteroffensive began. Suddenly, tech blogs ran stories about the gold-digging housewife trying to destroy a visionary founder. Anonymous sources claim Vivian had mental health struggles, substance dependencies, affairs with gardening staff. All lies, but lies traveled faster than court documents. Bradford's lawyer argued Vivian was merely a coding hobbyist whose tinkering had no real value. They offered $2 million in settlement, generous, they claimed, for someone who'd contributed nothing substantial. Then Rachel presented Exhibit 47, an email Bradford had sent to his CTO 3 years earlier. Without Vivian's back-end architecture, we're dead in the water. Do not let the board know she's the one keeping our processing speeds competitive. The courtroom fell silent. More evidence followed. Patent applications with Vivian's solutions rewritten in Bradford's name. Board presentations where her innovations became his insights. A recorded phone call where he admitted to a fellow founder, "My wife's the genius. I just know how to sell what she builds." His own words became the prosecution. The smear campaign intensified. Vivian's parents received anonymous letters about their daughter's supposed instability. Her Stanford professors got calls questioning her academic integrity. Someone leaked photos from her social media, adding cruel captions about the coding housewife who couldn't code. But documentation doesn't lie. Rachel systematically proved Vivian had authored 43% of Velocity Systems' core technology. The authentication system alone had prevented losses exceeding $80 million. Bradford's team pivoted, offering $15 million, then $25, then $35. $42 million, Rachel countered, plus intellectual property rights to everything she created, plus public acknowledgement of her contributions. The mediator looked at Bradford's lawyer. Your client built a $2 billion company on code he didn't write. $42 million seems reasonable. Bradford signed the settlement with a pen that cost more than most monthly salaries. Vivian watched him initial each page, his hand trembling slightly. The man who'd called her simple couldn't even maintain eye contact. She secured rights to 19 design patents. Her name would appear on every application she'd created. The truth, finally documented and undeniable, set her free. 6 months after signing divorce papers, Vivian sat in a rented WeWork office in San Mateo, staring at 3 whiteboards covered in algorithms. Not code for others to claim, not solutions for someone else's vision. Her own ideas, finally given space to breathe. The settlement money could have bought comfort for decades. Instead, she invested $30 million into answering a question Bradford had always dismissed. Why did enterprise software have to be so complicated that companies needed consultants just to use it? Users aren't stupid, she'd argued years ago. The software is. Bradford had laughed, explaining that complexity meant higher consulting fees, longer contracts, dependent clients. Velocity Systems thrived on confusion. Vivian wanted the opposite. She spent 12-hour days interviewing IT managers at small companies, the ones Velocity ignored as not scalable enough. Maria at a biotech startup explained how her team wasted 4 hours daily navigating 7 different platforms. Jerome Washington at a logistics company showed her spreadsheets jury-rigged to do what million-dollar software couldn't: actually communicate with each other. We don't need more features, Jerome had said, exhausted. We need things to just work together. Intuitive Industries Incorporated on a Thursday. Vivian chose the name deliberately, a rejection of the complexity worship that defines Silicon Valley. Her first hire wasn't a hotshot Stanford graduate, but Carmen Rodriguez, a community college professor who'd built elegant solutions with ancient hardware and zero budget. "Nobody ever asks us what we need," Carmen said during her interview. "They just assume we're not sophisticated enough to matter." Vivian's second hire was Marcus Thompson, a developer Bradford had fired for asking too many questions about user experience. Her third was Amy Lynn, who'd been passed over for a promotion at Velocity 6 times despite outperforming every metric. What would you build if you had nothing to prove to anyone? They worked from that WeWork space, then a small office in Redwood City. No exposed brick or craft beer on tap, just decent lighting, ergonomic chairs, and a mission statement Carmen wrote on a sticky note. Make it work for humans. The early mistakes came fast. Their first platform iteration was too simple. They'd overcorrected from Velocity's labyrinth. The second crashed under basic stress testing. The third worked perfectly but looked so understated that beta testers assumed it was unfinished. "We're not decorating," Vivian told her team after another 16-hour debugging session. "We're solving actual problems." Bradford's influence shadow-boxed her constantly. Potential investors would mention him casually, fishing for drama. Tech journalists called asking about the revenge company. Former Velocity employees reached out, careful not to violate NDAs but eager to share what wasn't working at their old company. She ignored them all. This wasn't about Bradford anymore. 9 months in, they landed something unexpected. Kevin Park, CTO of Reynolds Manufacturing, called directly. Reynolds was a 100-year-old company trying to modernize, hemorrhaging money on enterprise software that their floor managers couldn't operate. "I heard about you from my daughter," Kevin explained. "She's at Stanford. Said her professor mentioned someone finally building software for actual humans, not just other programmers." Vivian's team spent 3 weeks at Reynolds factories, watching workers struggle with tablets requiring 17 steps to log basic inventory. They observed managers printing reports just to manually re-enter data into different systems. They documented 43 hours of weekly redundancy that existed solely because programs wouldn't communicate. Intuitive Industries delivered a solution in 6 weeks. One interface, seamless integration. Floor workers learned it in an afternoon. Reynolds' efficiency increased by 34% in the first quarter. Kevin Park didn't just renew their contract. He introduced Vivian to 11 other manufacturing CTOs. Word spread through industries Velocity considered beneath notice. Companies that made actual products, employed thousands, and needed technology to serve them, not the other way around. Vivian's team grew to 12, then 20, then 35. They kept the sticky note mission statement, now framed in their expanded office. Every Friday, they gathered to read customer feedback, not from executives, but from end users whose jobs got easier because someone finally listened. 3 years into Intuitive Industries' existence, Bradford finally noticed, not because he respected the company, but because his fourth quarter earnings call had gone sideways. "Can you address the client defections to smaller competitors?" an analyst asked over speakerphone. The question echoed through Velocity's boardroom where Bradford sat, surrounded by executives earning 7 figures to protect his ego. "Temporary market noise," Bradford responded smoothly. "Some clients get distracted by flashy new interfaces. They always come back when they need real power." Except they weren't coming back. Vivian learned about his reaction from David Kim, Velocity's former head of customer success who joined Intuitive after watching Bradford berate a junior developer until she cried. "He spent 40 minutes ranting about amateur operations stealing his clients," David reported. "Never once asked why clients were leaving." The talent pipeline reversed direction quietly at first. Engineers tired of Bradford's management style sent careful LinkedIn messages. Product managers exhausted by his micromanagement scheduled coffee meetings. Quality assurance specialists whose bug reports got ignored for affecting non-priority users, meaning smaller clients, started updating their portfolios. Intuitive didn't poach. They simply offered what Velocity wouldn't: respect, ownership, and the chance to build something that actually helped people. Sarah Mitchell left Velocity after Bradford killed her accessibility initiative, calling it charity work. She brought 3 team members and a deep understanding of why 40 million Americans with disabilities couldn't use Velocity's platforms. Within 6 months, Intuitive's products set industry standards for inclusive design. Thomas Anderson departed when Bradford mocked his suggestion to simplify the user onboarding process. "We're not building Fisher-Price toys," Bradford had sneered. Thomas now led Intuitive's user experience team, where simplicity was considered sophistication, not weakness. The media narrative shifted gradually. Tech journalists who'd once celebrated Bradford's disruptive vision started questioning why Velocity needed 300-page implementation manuals. Industry analysts noted that Intuitive's clients reported 60% fewer support tickets despite paying 40% less in licensing fees. "It just works," became the phrase customer after customer repeated in case studies. Not revolutionary, not groundbreaking, just functional, reliable, human-centered technology. Market share told the real story. Year 1, Intuitive claimed 2% of Velocity's target market, the segments Bradford considered too small to matter. Year 2, 8%, including several Fortune 500 subsidiaries. Year 3, 18%, with growth accelerating. Reynolds Manufacturing's Kevin Park became Vivian's unofficial evangelist, telling anyone who'd listen about their 70% reduction in training costs. "My floor managers actually smile now," he'd say. When's the last time enterprise software made anyone smile? Bradford's dismissals grew more desperate. In a CNBC interview, he called Intuitive a boutique operation for companies afraid of real innovation. The clip went viral, particularly among IT professionals who'd spent years fighting his innovations that solved no actual problems. Then came the Westfield Industries defection. Bradford's second-largest client, responsible for $12 million in annual revenue, switched to Intuitive after their employees threatened mass resignation over Velocity's latest upgrade that added 47 new features nobody requested while breaking basic functions everyone needed. The email from Westfield's CEO was brief. "Our technology should serve our mission, not complicate it. Intuitive Industries understands this. Velocity Systems, despite repeated feedback, does not." Bradford called an emergency board meeting. Vivian heard about it from 3 different former Velocity employees within an hour. He'd apparently spent 90 minutes explaining why losing Westfield was actually strategic, allowing focus on clients who appreciate sophistication. The board wasn't buying it anymore. Neither was the market. Velocity stock dropped 12% in a week. Intuitive, still private, received its first unicorn valuation. 5 years after that humiliating night at the yacht club, Vivian stood backstage at Tech Forward Summit, adjusting the microphone pack on her tailored jacket. $800 million. That's what Forbes had valued Intuitive Industries at last month. Velocity Systems, meanwhile, was shopping itself to private equity firms after 3 consecutive quarters of losses. She hadn't known Bradford would be here. The organizers had scheduled them for different days. His keynote yesterday about pivoting through market disruption, hers today about building technology that actually works. But there he stood, lingering by the speaker's entrance like a ghost from another life. He looked older. The confident swagger had given way to something hunched, careful. His wedding ring was gone, a detail she noticed but didn't dwell on. The board had forced him to step down as CEO, keeping only a ceremonial chairman title. "Vivienne!" His voice cracked slightly on her name. She could have walked past. Should have, probably. Instead, she stopped, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since their lawyers had finished dividing their life. "Bradford, I heard your company just landed the federal contract, the one Velocity, bid for. We offered a solution that actually worked. Novel concept." He flinched but didn't retreat. "You were right, about the complexity, about listening to users, about—" He paused, seeming to wrestle with words. "I underestimated you, catastrophically." The admission hung between them. 5 years ago, she'd have given anything to hear it. Now it just felt hollow, like an invoice paid too late to matter. "You didn't underestimate me," Vivian corrected quietly. You never estimated me at all. I was furniture in your success story, a footnote in your biography. We built something together. No, the word came firm but not angry. You built a monument to your ego. I built solutions for problems you refused to see. When you finally noticed what I could do, you buried it because it threatened your narrative. Bradford's shoulders sagged. Behind them, conference attendees streamed past, some recognizing them, most absorbed in their own networking missions. The authentication system you created, he said suddenly, the one I claimed. It's still the only thing keeping Velocity functional. Everything else is failing. But that, he swallowed hard, that still works perfectly. Because I built it for the users, not the investors. I know. God, I know that now. His laugh held no humor. My new CEO, the board's CEO, keeps asking who designed it. Says it's the only code worth salvaging. I can't tell him. The NDAs, the NDAs expired last month. Bradford's head snapped up. What? Rachel negotiated a 5-year term. You can tell anyone you want now, though I suspect they already know. Silicon Valley's terrible at keeping secrets, especially ironic ones. The stage manager appeared, clipboard in hand. Ms. Vivian, 2 minutes to curtain. She'd legally returned to her maiden name 3 years ago. Bradford noticed, his expression crumbling further. I lost everything that mattered, he said quickly, desperately. Not the company or the money. You, your mind, my code, she suggested, not unkindly. My ability to make your dreams functional? Your belief that technology should help people. I spent so long trying to impress the wrong audience. I never saw I'd already impressed the only one who understood what we were building. Vivian adjusted her jacket one final time. We weren't building anything, Bradford. I was building. You were taking credit. There's a difference. She walked toward the stage entrance, then paused. Good luck with the acquisition. I heard Peninsula Partners offers reasonable terms for distressed assets. The roar of applause drowned out whatever he might have said next. Vivian stepped into the lights, facing an audience eager to hear how she'd built something extraordinary from the ashes of someone else's arrogance. 10 years after walking out of the St. Francis Yacht Club, Vivian stood in a converted warehouse in Oakland, watching 200 employees celebrate Intuitive Industries' anniversary. No yacht club. No $500-a-plate dinners. Just good food from local restaurants and genuine laughter from people who built something meaningful together. The company had expanded beyond enterprise software into healthcare systems, educational platforms, and accessibility tools. $3 billion in valuation, but numbers told only part of the story. Intuitive's products powered ventilators in rural hospitals, helped children with learning disabilities access education, and enabled small businesses to compete without million-dollar tech budgets. Remember when Bradford's investors called us the Walmart of software? Carmen Rodriguez asked, joining Vivian by the window overlooking San Francisco Bay. She now served as Chief Innovation Officer, having turned down offers from larger companies offering triple her salary. They meant it as an insult, Vivian replied. Accessible, affordable, practical. Everything they thought technology shouldn't be. The Vivian Foundation had launched 3 years prior, offering full scholarships and mentorship to women entering tech from non-traditional backgrounds. Vivian personally reviewed every application, looking for the ones others overlooked. The community college students, the career changers, the single mothers learning to code at night. This year alone, 47 graduates had joined companies that previously wouldn't have noticed their resumes. Marcus Thompson approached with his tablet, showing the latest metrics. That federal contract expanded again. Department of Veterans Affairs wants our healthcare interface in all facilities. Because it works, Amy Lynn added, joining their circle. Radical concept, software that actually functions. Across the bay, in a quiet transaction that barely made business news, Velocity Systems had sold to Peninsula Partners for 1/8 its peak valuation. Bradford retained his chairman emeritus title. Empty words on letterhead for a company being stripped for parts. The authentication system Vivian built remained their only consistently profitable asset, though the acquiring firm didn't understand why it worked so much better than everything else. Hey, boss, David Kim called out. Time for your speech. Vivian shook her head. No speeches. We're not that kind of company. But her employees had gathered anyway. Not for corporate theatrics, but from genuine appreciation. These weren't people performing enthusiasm for stock options. They were builders who'd found a place where their contributions mattered. 10 years ago, Vivian began, voice carrying without amplification, someone told me I came from a simpler background, that I couldn't grasp complexities, that some people were meant for quieter, smaller things. Several newer employees looked confused, but the original team understood. He was right about one thing. I do prefer simpler interfaces, clearer solutions, technology that serves rather than confuses. Turns out the market wanted that too. Laughter rippled through the crowd, warm and knowing. Every person in this room was told they weren't enough at some point. Not technical enough, not pedigreed enough, not aggressive enough, not masculine enough, not connected enough. Just not enough. She paused, looking at faces that reflected every age, ethnicity, and background Silicon Valley usually ignored. But here's what I learned. The person who makes you feel small needs you beneath them to feel tall. Your diminishment is their elevation. Your confusion is their expertise. Your failure is their success story. We built something different. Not perfect, but honest. Not revolutionary, but functional. Not exclusive, but accessible. And it turns out that's exactly what the world needed. The applause felt different from that night at the yacht club. Earned rather than performed. Genuine rather than obligatory. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their contributions matter. Because somewhere tonight, someone's sitting in their metaphorical pool house, building tomorrow's solutions while being told they're not capable of understanding today's problems. They're wrong about you too.